Time to open the meeting, guys.
December, I guess.
Approval of minutes, 4/18/19, there was no meeting in May. Need 'em, you sent those, right? They're here. I didn't read them,
Motion to
right?
approve the minutes from 4/18.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Scott's here.
I'm here. That Jamie, I don't think I was there.
Okay, so one abstention.
I approve the minutes.
Was everybody else here on April 18th? I don't even know if I was.
It was the meeting upstairs. I thought everyone.
No, I was not here. You were there.
Okay, so then it's, the minutes need to be amended because I marked you as present.
Okay.
So,
Approve the minutes that will be amended. Public speak. We have no public here. City officials. Anything to tell us, Jamie, that
I'm still trying.
we're still keeping our fingers crossed with the conference committee and the CPA, but the Senate and the House approved it. Don't know what's gonna happen in conference. That's the raise in fees that'll get us 30% match, guaranteed. So keep your fingers crossed on that. Comp balances. We had some money returned, that's good. We have almost $1 million in the bank. 950,000, 567, Jamie, that's what I have here. EHS batting cage has been
Complete.
closed out.
Closed out the return 8259.
Well, any chance you can pursue the others? You probably always pursue the others.
Constantly. That's all I do.
Well, we got stuff from 2007, so I'd love to see it. Lower Mill Pond Park and all those things, but I know there's reasons that we keep those open. Didn't we buy all the bleachers already? Park benches and bleachers?
All the materials were bought, but not all the foundations have been poured yet. And so
Okay.
my understanding is they're still pouring foundations as time allows. They're doing the construction with the parks maintenance people, so.
Okay.
They originally planned to have it done by 7/1, but a lot of the rain has caused some issues with them getting it done.
We haven't had any rain. What is that? All right. Just, anybody else have questions on open projects? I'm happy that Jamie's trying to get things cleared up. Because any money that they don't use, we can use. Right, so, back to the agenda. I'm gonna go to, because he's here, National Economic. So, make your case. You want $300,000.
I do have some additional handouts.
Besides the 40 pages you gave us?
Yes, a few more, because we want to be having you guys read for the rest of your lives. Another year in retirement. There's only one of those, and there should be 9 of these for everybody. And one of these for background information. So I was expecting.
So let me tell you what's gonna happen. You're gonna present this evening,
Yes.
we're gonna digest it. So we're not gonna,
Absolutely.
we're probably not,
Absolutely.
you're gonna, guys, you can ask questions, but I'm assuming all of you haven't read all this, so
Right.
we're probably gonna need you back at the next meeting to
That's fine.
discuss it and probably have more detailed questions.
I
Where,
think that you just got one copy. Do you want me to hold on to the project file?
What are you talking about?
There's one copy and then,
I don't have, is that something I need?
I don't know.
no, again, more
Is that in here?
background information. What you're looking, Jamie, at right now is kind of proof that we have the permits in place. So here is the acceptance letter from the Army Corps of Engineers.
Okay.
And here is the Conservation Commission meeting minutes, which I've highlighted. saying we have an extension on the local permitting. The only one I don't have paperwork on is the 401 DEP permit. I have a verbal approval, which always scares me, but we have.
Why don't you start from the beginning and tell us
Yeah.
why we need to do this?
Okay.
And then we'll talk about approvals.
Yeah, so let me come over here. I can either refer to Nashawani Pond here, or I can refer to Nashawani Pond there, but just again, for background information, where we are and where we want to go with this project. So, as you're well aware, Nashawani Pond has received funding from the CPA in the past, and without that money, we wouldn't be looking at the pond that we're looking at now. It'd be in much worse condition, although we've had some algae growing out there that's...
That is algae, that's not,
Well, what's happening, I can almost guarantee it, is that the dam is blocked. I did debris in front of the dam, and what I did last year, because I couldn't get anybody else to do it, I took a roof rake, removed it, and the algae went right over the dam. So I'm sure that's what's happening again this year. Not that it has anything to do with this project, but we are treating the pond sometime in July for algae and macrophytes. We have the funding for that project. So the reason we're here is that these two basins, we have a basin on Broadbrook here, sedimentation basin. That was permitted, approved by the Conservation Commission in 1996. The White Brook sedimentation basin was approved by the Conservation Commission in 1992. At the time, we had no idea how long it would take to fill up those basins. There's no way of calculating something like that. You can have been installing these all your life and you're still only going to have an estimate. My estimate was probably about 10 years. And after about 10 years, they did fill. Well, we're talking 90s here, now we're talking 2019, so they're more than filled. But the point being, they did their jobs. If you look at the Broadbrook Basin, it's pretty much filled to the surface. It was originally a 1/3 acre. I can show you the actual plan shortly. But this was originally, a meander was put on Broadbrook, so that just the law of settling velocity, you slow down the flow of water and the sediments will drop out. And it worked great. But now, all these years later, it's time to dig it back out. And the access road, unfortunately, has washed out as well. So that will have to be rebuilt in a better way this time, hopefully, because it was never constructed right the first time. So this base over here has a gabion weir structure on it. And again, that goes back to 1992. It's a physical barrier, about 24 feet in length. And it holds back the sediments. Instead of having a meander, it's more of a physical barrier. So a little bit of a basin was dug out behind the gabion weir structure, and sediments drop out. During high flow conditions, water will go over the gabion weir because you don't want to hold back water more than it should. And again, it has worked great, but it was time 10, 15 years ago to remove the sediments behind these structures. The problem has always been is we've had the permits in place, but we haven't had the finances in place. So hence we've had to go back, and I've done quite a bit of work trying to get all the permits back up to date, which we have now. So we're ready to go permit-wise. As far as how the structures actually look and how they actually work, so this is what we're actually trying to do. We'll start with the White Brook structure. So it's going to be a little bit different than what it's there now. If you peruse through the handout I gave you, it will show how the gabion weir looked at during construction and what it looks like now. So there's quite a bit of difference. If you're looking, so that's how it originally looked in 1992. And like I say, it worked great. All the sediments would drop out.
is that the new thing we just got?
Yeah, that's the one I just gave. So all the sediments would drop out here, but now the sediments are right up to the top and overflowing the structure. So what we want to do is that we're going to put down some kind of a timber mat or something similar, and access the basin from Nonotuck Park Road. And as they're going forward, they're gonna be putting these, again, I call them timber mats, but that'll be up to the contractor what they wanna use, but timber mats are pretty common. And they will lay them down so that they can work within this circular basin here. So they wanna dig it out. It's really nothing high-tech at this point. It's really just allowing the sediments to settle out. One of the things that actually helps the basin, or helps Neshowannock Pond, is when sediments do settle out, we get vegetation growing. And that vegetation is actually good, because what vegetation does is it takes up excess nutrients. So we don't want to clean it out too fast. We want some sediments to form there. But at this point, it's a jungle. As you can see from the picture there, you can't even see the weir because it's so overgrown. So that will have to be, the access will have to be made, trees will have to be cut down, no grubbing allowed. We have a long list of order conditions from the Conservation Commission. Sorry, Jay, you probably heard this 15 times now.
Yes, it's okay.
But, so in a nutshell, that's what we want to do with the basin. Much smaller project. Basically, they got a little circle behind it, allow the sediments to settle out by means of a physical barrier. Water will stay. We will not dewater during that operation. Okay, so if anybody has questions, stop me along the way, because it's easier for me to address them right away than go back.
When you said much smaller operation, smaller than?
Well, compared to the Broadbrook project,
Okay.
financially and man-hour wise.
Yeah.
We were hoping.
Harry has a question.
Sure.
When this is all done,
Mm-hmm,
say it gets all done,
mm-hmm.
how long does it last?
Well, just like I was saying before, probably another 10 years or so. Nobody can put a years on it. We even talked to the engineer who designed this, and he said, I don't know. Because what you put on one pond versus another pond versus another pond, everybody's pond is a little bit different. But I would say 10 years would be a reasonable amount of time.
When did we do the dredging before?
Well, this is
1990 something, right?
dredging.
No, it's probably with CK. It was finished, I think, in 2008 or so.
2008, so it's
This,
been
the
10 years.
the main pond here?
Well, whatever
Yeah, so.
we're trying to correct.
Right, so we're talking about the feeder streams that feed into Neshowannock Pond here. We're not talking about going back into the pond itself.
Okay.
There's three streams that feed Neshowannock Pond. There's White Brook, Broad Brook, and Wilton Brook. Wilton Brook actually goes right under the road over here. And because it's so close to the dam, it's been deemed not a significant source of sediments. So when I say not as big of a project, when you compare it to this project here for Broadbrook, the road has to be rebuilt, whereas in the other project, a road does not have to be rebuilt. And more has to be removed. In this case, again, when you're talking about a meander, the brook used to go straight across here. Okay, that's the way it was forever. But then we decided that the best sort of plan was to give it this little meander here. So it slows down the water, and all the sediments, well, I shouldn't say all the sediments, but a lot of the sediments settle out right at that little meander. And again, it's worked great because it's filled. All those sediments would be in the pond at this point. And as you mentioned, the dredge, you know, the city paid a lot of money for that. And so we're trying to prevent from ever having to do that again.
That's what I thought. That's what I
Yeah.
thought.
We don't want to go back in and dredge, at least not in my
Are
lifetime.
we at a point where this is urgent because if we don't fix it, we're going to start accumulating sediment in the pond?
Yes. We're at the point right now where it's happening.
There is sediment getting into the pond.
Yes, yeah. Again, a lot of it mostly comes in because the structures are filled at this point. This one here is still working a little bit. The Broadbrook Basin, it still has a little bit of that meander going, so sediments are still dropping out. But I would say it's about 80 to 85% filled. So it's not gonna, 85% filled, it's not doing its ultimate capacity, you know. This was originally 1/3 of an acre in size. and in the middle it was about 5 feet deep, and we'd like to return it to approximately its original condition. And if you were to go down there, you would see most of it is sand, because it's a little technical, but there's something called Stokes' laws of settling velocity, where the heavier particles settle out first, and the finer particles, the silt and the clay, settle out later because they're lighter. So we're probably still getting some clays moving into the pond, but they're probably stopping in the wetland area, because where this is located, the pond is not directly right there. You are still looking at a lot of wetlands that weren't there. Say, well, when I was a kid, my uncle lived at the end of Lang Avenue. They would bring my canoe and launch it right from the end of Lang Avenue. It's all a wetland now, you can't do it. So we've lost it. We've lost it. Well, I've always been lost it. But the reality is that this pond that we're looking at, you turn that way, was about 55 acres in size at one point. It's now about 30 acres in size. And you can't reclaim a larger pond. The laws prevent that. What you can go, and what we did go, is that we went deeper. And the deeper you go, the better off you are as far as like sunlight penetration. So if you don't have the sunlight penetrating down to the bottom, you're not going to get the macrophyte growth. You're not going to get as much plant growth, and it's just an all-around better thing. I mean, if we had unlimited funds, we could have taken out more sediments, but we had to work within the allotted funds that we had. And it was a great project. I mean, it was very successful. There's no two ways about that. I think it was about 50,000 cubic yards were removed, and now it's a much deeper pond. In the center, where we're looking here, we didn't dredge anything, because that's already pretty deep. The deepest part is about 15 feet roughly. So it would have been nice to be able to go in there and make that even deeper, but the funding just didn't allow for it, and that's okay, because we got what we needed out of the project.
Just, sorry, when you're talking about the funding for that, just as a way of comparison, because, you know, if we don't do this, we might have to do that again.
Right.
What did the dredging of the main pond cost?
About $2.5 million.
Gosh, so
This was short.
I don't
short
think
money.
CPA paid for all of that.
No,
Army Corps of
there was-
Engineers,
our
right?
Army Corps came to the rescue here, and they were a pleasure to work with, to be honest with you. I was working with one individual, and he was getting close to retirement, and he was counting his days, and he didn't want to do too much. Hopefully he's not watching tonight. But his replacement was just terrific. I mean, they couldn't have worked with a better person. And because things happen, I mean, you have to go day by day. And I was lucky enough to be the consultant for the town on the dredge. And what we had done on the pond over, I still call it Rubber Thread Pond. I don't know technically what it's called, Upper Mill Pond, whatever it is. But
I
the
think it's
pond,
Upper Mill now.
what is it called?
I think Upper Mill.
Upper Mill.
Which one?
The one that's on this side of the street, on the
Yeah.
parking lot side. A structure was put in place to hold back the water, because we didn't want that water rushing in. But we wanted to maintain the water level on that side. You don't want an empty pond if you don't have to have it. Well, the structure broke. I mean, it just, under all the weight of the water, it just washed right out. And in washing out, it made a nice groove right through this area over here, and took the sediments with it and washed them over the dam. But that is why you have to, like, every day a new problem arises. And like I said, I was lucky enough to work with somebody that was reasonable, and that we had to, you know, make accommodations depending on what happened that day. 'Cause it seemed like something always happened, you know? You're draining a
Alright.
pond that shouldn't be drained. So this one here is going to be dewatered. There's going to be pumps brought in, and it's going to be diverted around. So when the water comes in, it's going to be pumped around so that this can be worked in dry conditions. Again, the sizing of the pumps up to the contractor. Coffer dams will be installed. The copy you have shows this probably like 1 inch in size, and even with my best glasses on, I couldn't read any of that. So that's why hopefully this background information is helpful on a little bit of a larger picture, even though if you're sitting far enough away, you're probably not seeing too much. But yeah, that's the key point, is that we spent a lot of money on Nashwanik. Nashwanik is, you know, the center of our town. It has received tremendous support from just about everybody, including CPA funding. And,
Last question?
sure.
So I'm totally out of my element with this, I'm just gonna be very honest.
Uh-huh.
I don't really know much about water flows and good sediment versus bad sediment.
Yep.
And, so it's hard, it's a little bit, this is an education process a little bit
That's
for me.
fine, yep.
So is this a dynamic that happens with all dammed ponds and lakes?
Yes.
That eventually,
yeah.
if left alone, a dammed pond or lake
Yeah.
will have an encroachment and it will get smaller and
Yeah.
smaller and smaller?
There's two terms that go with that. There's eutrophication, which is the natural aging of a pond. So you can have a pond in the middle of the wilderness, nothing from humans are making, you know, nutrients or sediment problems, but eventually over time, given enough years, that pond will continue to get smaller and smaller. But the key point is, over time, it'll take a long time. This one here is suffering from a term called cultural eutrophication, which means man-induced. So we have a 10 square mile watershed for Nashwanik Pond. So that means you could be miles away, but we're at the bottom of the bowl right here. So the nutrients are running, somebody fertilizes their yard, and eventually those chemicals are going to make their way into the pond. If we could do watershed best management practices, that would be the best way to go to keep the pond healthy. But when you have a watershed that big, basically ratios, it's about 212 to 1, watershed ratio to pond ratio. Anything over about 50 to 1, it's really hard to control the nutrients from outside. And, you know, again, I'm not sure how many people have like gone around the pond, but we also have a lot of structures in place to keep the sediments along the shoreline from running into the pond, because cars would drive right up to the edge, and that compacts the soil. The compacted soil can't have vegetation growing on it, so it just washes right into the pond. So we've blocked access in certain points. The old boathouse beach was a major issue, because people would literally pull their, if they had a pickup truck, they would pull the pickup truck, and not everybody, but I've seen it, into the water. Take their tailgate down and fish right out of their truck. So that doesn't happen anymore. So we've done a lot to do, we've been told that what we've done is sort of like the projects that everybody else, we set the standard for, because we've really done a lot of good, considering what we have here. We have a pond that's beautiful in the center of town. I drive through the town now and people are out there enjoying it like never before. There's just no doubt about that. It is a focal point. It's why people will come into East Hampton to look at our pond, to sit around our pond, and it brings in business for the shops as well. But we've also got the issue of it's a hard pond to control the health of it. This is a big piece of it. This is going to keep the sediments out of the pond so that dredging doesn't have to happen again. Again, I can't say it's never going to happen, but certainly not in my lifetime. It shouldn't happen. Yes.
So just,
So-
go ahead.
You just did those two projects, the total of those is $301,000.
Yes.
Broad Book and White Book.
Yeah, them
The
combined.
budgets you have right here.
Yeah.
And as far as funding for this, I mean, right now you're asking for CPA to fund it 100%.
We don't have additional funds, you know. I used to be in the National Water Steering Committee. I'm no longer on there, but we have some terrific people that are still on there. Paul Novak, who just walked into the room, is the chairperson of that committee, and they do amazing work fundraising. When it was early days, when it was Paul and I and a couple other people, we were looking at fundraising. We were looking at what we can do to help save the pond, and hopefully the funding would fall in place. just goes to show you how things change over time, is that this siltation basin was done for $30,000, okay? The Gabion Weir was done for $10,000 in the 90s.
Right.
Now we're 2019 and we're looking at $300,000, not to even start from scratch, but to just repair what is there.
Well, first of all, I mean, thank you for all your work with the pond. I totally agree that it's a focal point of the time and
Yeah, no
and,
problem.
you know, we need to keep it healthy. As far as the funding, I mean, I wasn't really expecting like the fundraising as far as the pond committee, but I just didn't know if there's been like grants explored, like, you know, we had the
Yeah.
Army Corps of Engineers did $2.5 million for the dredge, like,
Yeah.
are there any
Well,
other
we had to
sources?
have kick, the town had, I still call it the town, the city had to kick in their part, but yeah, they were a big part of it.
Well, CPA funded some of that, yeah.
You're right, but as well as.
Most of it.
Yeah, they, without the CPA funding, it wouldn't be done, you know, and we can have these fundraisers where we raise $5,000 or so, which to me is just amazing compared to where we came from. But yes, a lot of people have looked into grant proposals and so on. There's
nothing out there?
We
Paul, there's
haven't
nothing out
found
there?
it, you know?
No, and the other thing is, and I don't mean to jump in here, but we're under a timing issue with these types of projects where the permits, they don't last forever. And sometimes the funding that we were able to secure out there in the past was for smaller amounts. We've had Fish and Wildlife involved, we've had Army Corps of Engineers involved in various areas, and these grants were Frank Stanley Beverage Foundation, there was 10,000 here, 10,000 there. We were only able to get the smaller money. We got 2 319 grants with the state that generally have to wait in line for years and years and years. We managed to get 2 of them back to back, but they were, again, it wasn't huge money, $25,000. Not that $25,000 isn't huge money, but it's the magnitude and the timing of this particular project matched against what we might be able to scrape up, 10 here, 20 there, whatever. We certainly would try to do that going forward, but I'm just worried about these permits burning up on us, and then, you know, you 10 here, 20 there, it doesn't do it.
We're always going to have small little projects. Like I mentioned, in July, there's going to be an application for the macrophytes. For those who are wondering what macrophytes are, they're just the aquatic weeds and the algae. So that's probably anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks away. But that's not cheap. That's thousands of dollars right there, and we've been able to.
10,000.
Yeah.
And
You're
the members
coming
of
to
our
us for that?
committee that get involved with that Winterfest really do an awful lot of work trying to do the Winterfest. And the Winterfest generates about that amount. So the Winterfest is basically what we're trying to fund.
And we don't want to forget Florence Savings Bank.
Oh, no, I
They've
was
been-
just gonna say
Yeah.
that. You know, we did have we did have Florence Savings come in with a $10,000 check at one time, and then a $3,500 one after that. But again, it's the kind of money that we're facing at this juncture here that's a lot. I can't find anything out there that's 300 grand.
Well,
So
we
how
don't,
did we get
I
to
wouldn't
300
expect that,
grand?
but I would expect,
How
you know,
did you come up with 300
Yeah,
grand? So we're not-
GZA was recruited to do the math.
and then who paid for this whole
The
engineering study?
GZA part, how did that work out, Paul?
How did you get, you had to
How'd you
pay
get
for
the
this
numbers?
study, right, Paul?
Yeah, and forgive me because I've been, I don't have all my notes with me right now, but I think we ended up paying some of that out of our own account, the pond account. We have about $50,000 in the pond account right now.
But that's important because that means you've put in your money to
Yeah.
get this
Oh, yeah.
design done. This is
Oh,
big
yeah.
time.
Yeah,
That's important to know.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to put out there to this committee and to the council and anybody who asks that this isn't a $300,000 project. It's what did this cost? 10 grand or something like that to get
Yeah.
this done? So, okay.
But this is GZ pays
You know, they're,
financial.
that's something that was beyond my cap, I mean, I
Right.
try to do as much permitting as I can, so
We
I.
haven't quoted it to,
But for
Anybody.
something like finances, how much it costs for, you know, mobilizing equipment and so on, we had to have somebody that had access to the actual books where you can, it's like when you go to an auto body shop, they can tell you, oh, you have a dent in your fender and it's gonna cost you so much because it's gonna take a certain amount
We're
of
gonna have to
hours.
put this out to bid.
Yeah.
City property, right?
Yeah. it'll
So
go
this
up.
is an estimate that'll have to go out to,
Yes.
with other companies.
so maybe that needs to happen before we find out that it's, can't do it first.
No, we can't put anything to bid if you don't have the money to then award it.
We set the limit at 301. If all the project bids come in at 320, they have to come back to us. You know, we limit the budget based on these figures, which seem to be fairly well-educated figures. They're not just
Right, they're not
thrown out there.
You know, that was part of the initial problem with the application, is that it had to be very specific. And that's why GZA had to get involved for the specifics.
Well, I'm going to say that I'm certainly in favor of this. We need to fix the bond. What I'm not happy about is $300,000 coming out of the CPA. It's urgent, and I would love to see you guys, knowing that this is going to happen again in 10 years, 12 years, because these
Yeah.
basins fill up and they need to be
Yeah.
fixed again, that we don't set the precedent that the CPA is going to pay, because then it's going to cost $600,000.
Yeah. Well, just.
You know what I'm saying? So we have to plan that, grant-wise, Paul, any way you can do that, because
But
this is a big chunk of cash.
We won't go back to square one this time, though, because the access road is gonna get built right this time. The contractor who did it, as soon as I saw what they were doing, I was
Really?
telling Paul, I was telling people, this is gonna wash out, and it did like that. This time it's gonna be done right, so you're not gonna redo the access road.
Are you going to be like the project manager?
Supposedly, that's what I've heard. I haven't accepted, but I probably will.
All right, well,
So what is the urgency on this in terms of timing? Do you think get it done
For the
before
permitting,
winter?
you're saying?
the permitting and
It's
it's,
basically got to be done before the
Yeah, well,
before the
when do the
ground freezes
permits run
this
out,
winter.
Paul?
Gary,
They're a little different because we just re-upped them in 2018. We have a few years, but I think.
For us, you have May of '22, but that doesn't mean it's not
Right,
dumping sediment into the pond tomorrow.
right.
Well,
And
that's the other urgency. It's
And-
now
and-
dumping sediment into the pond.
Right. And as Jay knows, we can't show up a day before, you know, you have to go before these committees months ahead of time, or they won't even look at you.
But you have the permits in place, so if you
Yeah.
had the funding, you could go right ahead with this.
Yes.
There's nothing delaying it from the permit point of view.
No, like I mentioned, you have the physical acceptance letters from Conservation Commission and from Army Corps, which has the 404 permit. The 401 was a verbal, and I just could not get the guy to send me something in writing. He said, Gary, you're all set. Just make sure you don't go over the limits that we set. And I said, yeah, but it really would be nice to have something in writing. Gary, you are all set. And so,
Well, I think you're right. Get it in writing.
yeah.
In case whoever's telling you that retires.
Yes, that's true.
Well, what do you guys think? I think that it's gonna have to be done, but I feel maybe you wanna absorb this a little bit.
I'm generally in favor of it too, but it is probably what, half or a little less than half
Wanna
of our
continue to our next meeting?
undesignated.
Yes.
Motion to continue to our next meeting.
Yeah.
Well, let's just talk a little bit and then go to the next meeting. I mean, we're not gonna vote on it tonight, don't worry about that, but it is, we have 950,000 in the bank, this is gonna hit us. But, you know, we're getting a new budget, July 1. So it's not that bad. As I said, I'd love to see 100 grand come from someplace else, but I also know the pond is a beautiful asset to this community. And to be honest with you, if we didn't have the CPA, none of this would happen. There would be no
Pond
dredging, we
wouldn't have
wouldn't
been
be, the pond wouldn't exist, the boardwalk wouldn't exist. People need to know that. I want a big sign out there. Seriously,
Yeah.
don't complain about the CPA tax. Look at this.
And-
Sorry,
and that
that was a
could-
little emotional vote.
No, but I agree. I 100% agree that when Florence Savings Bank kicked in their money, they deserve the sign. When CPA kicks in money, they deserve a sign, you know,
So
letting the people know where the money's going. I agree. I don't know if you're being facetious or not, Dan.
No, Jesus, I'm not.
No? Okay, let's get a sign.
Would
I
it
want a
help?
sign. It's part of the contract. There should be a sign up.
We'll absorb that. The committee will absorb the sign money.
Well, that's good.
Would it help if we contributed a fairly good chunk of our money? I mean, I think we've got about $50,000.
Would it help?
Yeah,
I think, mean,
I think if you're gonna do that, that would help a lot.
yeah, and part of it is like, I mean, A, this is a big, you know, it's a pretty significant project financially, right? B, like, I can't remember ever covering 100%
Yeah.
of anything anywhere near this large. Like the things we've covered 100%, I feel like have been like $5,000. You know what I mean? Like typically, it's
There's
like,
a
okay,
grant
we're
or
asking the
something.
CPA for
Football
50%.
field, we did the whole
We
thing?
did the whole thing.
Yeah.
No, they
kicked
had
in like
some
20.
small amounts of labor and
They
things.
kicked in like 20.
It wasn't much.
So, you know, and so even just precedent, like, so other people, we can say, you know what I mean, to be able to say, like, look, we really like to be funding things where people have skinny, and I'm not saying that,
Oh, yeah,
you know,
no.
and not, you know, obviously I appreciate the importance, I appreciate
Yeah.
the time
Well,
constraints, is
if
that,
it makes you feel any better, this pond was slated for a $1.5 million amount for the dredge that occurred back in 2010, 2011. And the city had nothing for that. And the federal government was picking up 60% of that tab. The CPA basically fronted the rest.
600 grand, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you're leveraging that against 1.5 million,
right, see, that's the
bad.
point, right,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I understand.
Like, I would vote for
Yeah.
300,000 in a second if it meant we were gonna get $1.5 million
Sure,
to be,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, then it's like, oh,
I
like
certainly
that's,
do.
it's just when it's 100% and where it's all coming from here, that's the only thing that makes it.
And it's a better sell to the city council, to be honest with you. Here's what I want to do. Go back to your committee,
Yeah.
see if they're willing to throw in some money. 50 would be great.
Yeah,
And come back with a new budget. We'll vote on it in August. Is that all right?
yeah.
Because obviously we have a lot of information to look at, but you've done a great job of telling us what the dangers are. And I don't want more sediment coming in any sooner. I mean, if we give you if it happens in August that we vote this in, you'll get the council to vote on it in the second meeting in September, and you'll have the money. And therefore, maybe you can get started in the fall. I don't know, is that possible?
You want to do during low flow conditions, and the fall's not low flow conditions.
Well, if you
Ideally-
wait till the spring, what's the sediment
Yeah.
gonna do? I mean, I
Well,
don't know what to tell you. I wish you
right.
came back to us a couple months ago, but.
No, I understand, but at least lining it up at the latest for next summer, that, I mean,
Right.
we've got a lot of years behind us.
Well,
It's-
that'll happen, and I'll tell you right now, I think this committee and the council will look very favorably on it if the pond committee can put some money into it.
And if, I mean, when you're saying, you know, you have, like, you found grants, they're not $300,000, but they're 10 grand.
Yeah,
If
Well,
you
they
put
all
in some
add
money
up.
and then there's like a 10 grand grant and a 10
Yeah.
grand grant, and then now we've got $80,000 or whatever it
Yeah.
is, that's very significant. You know what I mean?
Hey,
Like,
I could probably reach out to the community as well, you know?
I think it would be useful because it's a dangerous precedent, as Scott has said,
Yeah.
100%
Yeah.
for $300,000.
Yeah,
That's tough.
totally understand, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
why don't you work, you got a month? Well, you got more than that. If you're looking for the summer start, if you need more time to get some more fundraising
Well, we'll
together.
need to just, you know, we'll have to go out to bid, which will take some
Well,
time.
you can't go out to bid until the money's approved.
Well, right, but what I'm saying, once the money's there, if the project still can't commence, you know, the following week, because it's gonna have to go out to bid.
Right, so you'll have the fall to do that
Right,
and everything, so
exactly.
great. Well, I don't see any reason, if you can get funding together, we can't vote on this in August. And we just need commitments
Sure.
from you and any funding sources you have.
Can't ask for anything better.
No,
Certainly understand.
we love the pond. It's a gem of our city.
Yeah,
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it.
Okay?
And I think some of it is just trying to understand the rate of deterioration and what we're getting for our money.
Well, I think what you're looking
So-
at there, I had to re-up the Army Corps permit, and that was the introduction to the renewal. So that was my summation of, you know, why we had to do it, how much cubic yards are gonna be removed, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a one-page summation of the larger document that I only made one copy of. So that's what you're looking at there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this isn't about, like, do we want a pond or not, or do we, do we value our pond? I mean, like, sure, I think this is a fabulous centerpiece to our community. For me, I'm really just having a hard time understanding how compelling is the need, like, what the rate of the growth and deterioration is. I sort
we
of
don't
was
do this, what happens?
before tonight. I was sort of under the impression, okay, every now and then we have to dredge the pond, whatever it is. And I don't even know what the time is. This is how sort of my understanding is of these kinds of issues. Just every 20, 30 years, get some people in. We have to clean up the pond. So I'm just. I don't know where to look in this stack of documents that will tell me,
Yeah.
okay, this is a good use of our taxpayer money, because what it's doing is,
I think the easiest
so the
way-
value proposition isn't as transparent for me. Maybe it was a little bit more for you, Dan. But I'm wondering, if you wait 5 years, or if you aside from permits, what is lost in any additional year that we wait on this project? And if you could help me with that particular question, I think I'd feel a little bit better knowing, okay, yes, this is something that's worth $100,000 of CPA money, or this is something that's worth 150. I can't quantify. These are some very abstract numbers for me. You could have been coming in asking for 200,000 or 500,000, and I really what is. It's really very abstract for me, so I'm just challenged by that.
Okay.
One thing I share with people that will probably touch upon that is that this body of water lost 35 acres in the last 50 years. So in the last 50 years, and what we have is the pond is, what we're dealing with here is it's called cultural eutrophication. Eutrophication
talked
is
about that.
death of a water body. Cultural means the cultural aspects that help accelerate that process. So what we have is 5 bridges on Hendrick Street that are all, when the road sand goes on the road, it then goes into the bridge culverts and goes into Broad Brook. I know when I graduated high school, that was a good handful of years ago, but where we were able to row a boat in water that was just about over our heads is called land now. Just land.
You mean Broadbrook?
Yeah, Broad Brook, I'm sorry, yeah. So if we went up to the mouth of Broad Brook in 1976, you would have been able to run a canoe or a rowboat in a huge bay over there. That bay is gone, it's all cattails now. And then the road sand that comes in from 141, the mountain road, you know how hard that gets hit with sediment. That again is another contributing factor to the sediment load to Broad Brook.
I've always had the sense that
Yeah.
the pond used to be much more accessible and go deeper,
Yeah.
further back.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of aware, that has been the case.
And I'm not saying 1 year is gonna be you're not gonna see it. You won't see it in a year.
Well, and that's where the data, I think, would help quantify this for me a little bit, because the photographs are nice as a before and an after, but I don't have a really good sense of,
But I think,
we're looking at 35, how many acres, 25 acres?
35 acres.
35 acres over,
I
So-
think in a simplified form, what I understand this is, the basins, which we are repairing, collect water and sediment, preventing it from getting into the pond.
Right.
If they're not repaired, they're now overflowing now, and sediment is getting into the pond. The pond will begin, and we'll need $2 or $3 million to dredge it in the future.
Yeah, it's gonna go right
But
back.
without the basins doing that, with the basins doing that, we're preventing the need for dredging in the future. It won't be needed. So this 300,000 is preventing, to me, $3 million, $4 million down the road to dredge the pond.
Yeah.
So what I think will help Greg and anybody else here is try to be simple about how this project, not in engineering terms,
Yeah.
but in layman's terms,
Yeah.
how these basins help prevent the pond from gaining sediment and losing more acreage. And if you can do that in a way that, you know, it can be data, you know, in 19 such, whenever.
Yeah.
But I think that would help. In layman's terms, does that help, Greg? Does that make sense to you? Because
Sure,
I
I mean,
think what we need is to
we have a
learn what these
1992
basins do.
We have we have projects from 1992 that were designed to prevent sediment getting in the pond. Yet we dredged. We had to dredge. So I still don't fully understand.
I can answer that.
No, I still don't fully understand if that's correct, if that's a correct assumption, that we fund these projects and that actually means we won't need to dredge, period, or whether it just means we dredge less often.
Well-
And maybe you can answer that question.
Yep, I certainly can. Just to give you a little taste of the turmoil that was involved in the 90s, the siltation basin, which was designed for Broadbrook, that have the heavier flow, the heavier introduction of sediment, it took us over 10 years to get that installation in place, simply because our Conservation Commission at that time didn't think that that was a good idea. And Gary and I went to the DEP in Springfield and did a slideshow to them about this entire project, and they came out and says, this is a very well thought out, effective way of treating this situation. What's the problem with your East Hampton Conservation Commission? That's when the cave-in came and half the commission quit. And we ended up getting that project, but the thing is in order to dredge, it was a requirement by the Army Corps of Engineers that these two installations had to be in place, otherwise they were not allowed to dredge. So if they went in 1992 and we dredged in 2011, it wasn't that we had to dredge because these things weren't doing their jobs. It was that we had to get these installations in place in order to be compliant to the dredging requirements of the ACOE, the Army Corps of Engineers.
So they wouldn't have to pay for it again.
Right, because they don't want to see another dredge go on in the next 10, 20 years because of the fact that all we're doing is putting a Band-Aid or a quick fix on something without putting anything in place to prevent it from or slow it down, from happening in the future.
So
This pond was dredged before 2011?
No,
Never.
no,
So the dredge.
no, it never was.
Would it be fair to say that the sediment that you were dredging out was mostly pre-92 or 95?
Oh, it goes all the way back to the
And
30s.
so
It was never dredged.
It was never dredged.
So the 30s to then, that the post 90s, the post these projects was not a significant part of that dredge.
No,
I
it
mean,
was-
the additional, to get to what you're like, that we still had to dredge after this, but
Yeah.
you were dredging what happened before this.
Correct.
And in all honesty, not all the sediments are coming in from these tributaries. I mean, you're going to still get, even though we have things in place to prevent the shorelines from sediments entering there, you're going to have the entire perimeter of the pond is primed to let sediments in, but these streams are the major cause.
primary.
Right, so we can't say that this will never have to be dredged again. It would be foolish to say so, but shouldn't be in my lifetime,
Well, if you hadn't done it in 100 years, I hope not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm under the impression that the rate of sediment has increased, and maybe that's because of development, maybe that's because of the kind of sanding of roads and other kinds of things that are in the area, but just based on your saying it had never been dredged, and the kind of rate of deterioration that we've experienced in the last 50 years seems to be higher than in the prior 50 years.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's just an
Industrial.
impression that I have.
Yeah, it's all about development,
Harry,
You think it'd be possible to get somebody down here from the Army Corps of Engineers and have them fill us in what they think? Would that be possible? Or what do you know, who are you gonna contact?
I have contact people.
Have
Gary
somebody
gets
come down here
contact
from them and see
people.
what they say about this whole thing.
that would be fine. If you want to bring them, and they're on your side with regard to selling the project, the fact that this basin, if these basins aren't repaired by the city, they're not gonna come and dredge again. They're not gonna put money into it.
No,
I would imagine from what you're telling me. Because they insisted that we build these basins
yeah.
back in 2000, whenever you built them, so that they would dredge. When we finally got the money together in 2011, we dredged. Can you tell me this? Have you done measurement soundings to tell me if the pond is losing depth of sediment now? Do you know if it's changed
The
in
only
the last 10 years since the basins were installed?
No, we don't have equipment for that. The Army Corps of Engineers did come in and sound the entire pond with a big boat. And
That was well before, when they
That was
had,
to measure what was going to be taken out of the pond. So it was part of the dredging component is to, you know, it was to remove 75,000 cubic yards of sediment or whatever. And that's the way they did. They did a before and after with that boat to do that.
would this help to, I want to shorten this discussion now because you're going to come back with hopefully some more data, some layman's terms. And if we can get a person from the Army Corps of Engineers, as long as they're not geeky and they can give us some good information, that would be helpful. I think Harry's point is good. Would that help the committee be happy with that?
Well, let me just ask the question, what do you want from the Army Corps of Engineers verbally? What are you looking for? Are you looking for data? Are you looking for?
To help defend your request.
Yeah, an
Well,
opinion,
they
of what's
signed
going
off on it.
on. We gotta sit there and take your word for it. I'd like to have somebody come in here, some expert on this whole thing, and then have them fill us in.
Well,
We're just sitting here listening to you, both of you guys, giving us all these facts, and it might be another side of the story we don't even know about,
Well,
possibly.
I don't agree with you, Harry. I think I trust these guys. They've been.
Well, I
around
don't,
for a
it's
long
not that I don't trust them, but it's always nice to have a second opinion.
Well, the goal is maintenance of the pond, right?
Yeah.
And so I think what you're putting forward is one approach on how we maintain this pond that has a certain dollar amount and so forth. And I guess one thing in having somebody else here would be to say, somebody who kind of weighs in as a third party and says, this approach makes the most sense. This particular approach that we're looking to fund 6 figures potentially with taxpayer dollars, this approach is the best way to maintain this pond. I think that for me is peace of mind versus some other approach. And it has nothing to do with not trusting or whatever. I think as a community, we want to be taking the best approach for maintaining the pond.
In fact, if you have,
And so that's what I'd like to hear, I guess.
I think he's right. If you have literature from back in 2011 that the
I
Army
was
Corps
just-
of Engineers
I was just gonna say
said,
that,
if you have letters from them
requirement.
saying, if you don't do these basins this way, we will not fund the project, bring those, send those to Jamie. Also, though, if you can get somebody here, and if you can't get somebody here for the August meeting, at least get something in writing from them that defends your approach. But I would rather have a human being here that can help us. And again, I think Greg and Harry's point are well taken. We're funding a great deal of this project. I don't think there's another way to do it. I mean, I think you have to fix these. And you're telling us, which is another question I'd like to ask them, is there any way to prevent this from happening every 10 years? Probably not, because you're always going to have sediment. You're always going to have, you know, the roads and sand and everything. Because he said this is going to happen again in 10 or 12 years.
yeah, well, that's a hypothetical number. I mean, it's a number that when I was looking at the basins, as I mentioned, the engineer couldn't tell us what it would take, 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, because what happens in Pond A and Pond B looks exactly the same, it's not gonna have the same sedimentation rate. It's just that, in my mind, 10 years was reasonable. You know, could it be 15? Yes. You know, when they are about half full, you wanna start taking a look at, you know, getting them dug out. But again, not starting from square one, because the access road will be there.
Some of the infrastructure that you're doing now won't have to be done again.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, so,
It's probably most of the cost of what's going on now, the installation of those roads.
because what you're gonna do, the basic thing you have to do is dig out these basins. Get
Well,
the
they're-
sediment out of it so they
That's
can.
what they're supposed to be, they're clean-out basins.
Right,
That's really
okay.
what they
I
are.
understand now.
Yeah. And the fact that they need cleaning out just lends itself to that they work.
All right.
So just one last, so is part of this plan to make sure that these access roads get maintained also?
They have to
So
be,
that
yes.
within 10 years, you don't come back and you
Who
have to rebuild
maintains
the whole thing again, yeah. Who
City?
will-
Is this a DPW thing?
you know.
Who's supposed to do this?
If they're constructed.
I myself would rather they,
No one
instead
has
of
to
giving me
do it.
20 grand for this project, have some sort of plan and use their money to put some plan in place to maintain these basins so that the next time it has to be done, it's an easier project or a less expensive project.
Well, okay, I don't know what that is,
Yeah.
but all right.
What I'm hearing is if the roads are constructed correctly, they'll not have to be maintained, they won't wash away.
Okay,
And they'll be
that's,
there.
yeah.
There's really only one, right? Like the
Well,
other
there's
one's
one for
fine, right?
White Brook and one for Broad.
Well, it's temporary access for the White Brook one. You're gonna have timber mats laid down, but then as they leave, they're taking the mats with them. So,
Does
the-
it
the
not
access-
need to have access to them?
well, in 10
Permanent
years'
access?
time, the amount that will grow back will be small. I mean, you might have to go in there and cut down some 2-inch,
Oh, you mean on the
3-inch trees
access?
to get access again, but it's not like starting with 30 years worth of growth there. You can still, if you look really hard, you can see where the original access was. It hasn't grown back 100%. The trees are a little bit smaller, you can,
Right.
it's been all those years. But the big
Right.
road for Broad Brook will have things like water bars on them, so that water won't just go rushing down. The water will be diverted off to the side. So we have a much better plan in place
All
now.
right. So you got your homework. If we can get an Army Corps of Engineer, good. If you can get funding, that's even better. Andy's point is well taken. Look at what you will need to put into these basins, if there's anything that you can do to slow this rate of sediment, that your funding can help. We don't know this. All of these things are great points, and anything you can do to make this clearer to the layperson. I'm pretty understanding of it, but, you know,
Well, from a city
we
perspective,
need to make sure that this is a project that can be easily explained to a taxpayer who wants to know why we're spending the money.
the city can also help with this project in general. Cleaning out the catch basins would help tremendously. And
Is
I
that something you've ever asked the Board
Yes.
of Public Works?
Yes.
And they said no?
They had other projects in the works. I mean, it's not that they've never been cleaned out, but more often would be very helpful. And yes, we have asked in the past.
So,
It's just like keeping this
Oh,
dam
yeah.
clear. I mean, I've asked them to keep the debris in front of the dam away. And I'm not picking on anybody in particular here, because, you know, there's other projects that they have to deal with. And removing debris in front of the dam is not on the top of their list. But the algae wouldn't be there if it could wash over the dam.
so if the DPW emptied these basins, we wouldn't be here now?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say
So
we
the
would,
catch basins on the streets.
yes. We would still be here, but again, we're talking about the
The
future.
catch basins on the streets.
Because the catch basins drain into the,
You're right.
Harry,
How difficult can it possibly be to make sure that it's clear in front of that dam? I mean, you go walking by there every day, you look out there, you see a couple of small logs or stuff that washes down. Seriously, how difficult can that possibly be?
I did it with a roof rake,
Exactly.
you know,
And
so,
who's responsible for that?
you know,
I
city
don't know.
pond.
yes, but
Who is?
we would have to make sure that by ordinance, the Board of Public Works is responsible for it, and I'd have to look into that, but we could do that.
Well, let me put it to you this way. By the weekend, it'll be clear. One way or another, I'm gonna get out there and clear
Well,
it.
we rely on volunteers to do a lot of things. We wish we had city maintenance done, but, all right, I don't want to get into that now. All right, thank you. Okay?
Thank you.
August,
Yeah.
all right?
And then, yeah, thanks for all your work with the pond.
July meeting.
Yeah, do I-
Oh, July,
you
why
say
do I
August?
keep
We
saying
have-
August? July, July.
The illustration.
And that meeting is, so you guys are aware, is,
July 18th.
July 18th.
So anything that you want to send to the committee,
go through Jamie.
send it to me at least a week ahead of time.
Well, if you get stuff now, you don't have to wait for the next agenda to send it to us.
Right,
Send
but
it as soon as
I need at least a week, because that way committee has time to read it and get it, and
So-
otherwise.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you don't take offense to all the questions.
Oh,
No, that's what we're here for.
All right. So I have a problem, Jamie. We have an agenda,
Squeaky wheel.
People aren't here.
And those people aren't here, and I, for one, just spent a lot of time listening to a very good presentation. They came prepared, they knew the meeting was here. Maple School didn't come, City Space didn't come.
Can I ask,
Well,
Maple
wait a
School,
minute.
like,
They wanted to get a small amount of money to fix their playground equipment.
yeah,
They didn't
They're
bring,
they're not here, so.
they didn't come, so
why did they not, I mean, what's going on?
I don't know, they usually show
I
up.
talked to the guy.
since I'm on the cranky end of the table, question, for the city,
I think I'm pretty cranky
for
too.
the city space or whatever, that building, is the city involved at all with the maintenance of that building? It seems like every 3 months, we're either putting brick in it or fixing a roof or, I mean, I know they lease it from the city, but
They,
what exactly
through
is-
the leasing agreement, they are the ones responsible for restoration projects. The minor maintenance, I'm not positive that we don't do some of that. But in order to, part of the lease agreement is that they're the ones that look for funding to do their major projects. And they've done a lot.
Right, I get it. I know they do a lot of work, but a lot of it comes to us. So.
Well, it's the biggest historic building in the city, I mean, what am I gonna do?
Should get a copy of the lease agreement.
Do we have anything on the annual?
I'm sorry, I
You
do
gotta see where
not.
that line is.
I wanted to bring up, this is me, the CPA savings for Old Town Hall, right? I wanted to bring up what the auditor said. We can't put money aside unless we put it into historic preservation, which we don't want to do because it's stuck there if this project doesn't happen. We put 600,000 in there or something. The only way we can put money into this project is if they apply for it. I'd like to reserve some money so that when we have to bond for this project, it's dear to my heart, I think we all want it to happen. We're not bonding the entire amount, we can use some of the cash we've saved against it. But we can't put that money aside unless they come up and say, here's a project, we want to start funding the project, and they come up and we actually establish a project and say $600,000, and we put that money in the project. The problem with that is they could spend it, but I think we could prevent that by just saying they can't spend it until we approve it. You don't know.
That was the idea of the earmarks that we started to carry.
Earmarks have no legitimacy. You can write them in.
But it's sort of
But
a
it's-
as a visual aid, if we see that on our budget and we know that that's money we can't touch, I mean, it may not be legally set aside for
Well,
that, but we know that that's
There's,
what it's there
it's
for.
not money that we can't touch, that's what I'm getting.
But I actually think that's good. I mean, there, you could imagine a scenario where there's something that comes up that's super urgent that we say, actually, we want to touch that money and maybe we're gonna we have to bond a little more there because
You
I
mean,
don't know what, you know what I mean? Like,
you think it's good to put the project in? I'm not sure what you're saying.
no, I'm saying it's good to have it earmarked where we see it, but it doesn't actually, there's no legally binding.
Okay,
So
I just threw it out there because.
We could undo it if we need to. I think it's important to have it in there and sit, but I think the ability to undo it if we need to, I think.
Well, the earmark, to me, is fine as long as this committee stays together. I don't know how long this project's gonna take to fund. And then one of the questions I was gonna have City Space is, how you doing? But they're not here, so.
That'd be a good question.
So I agree, okay, I just wanted to throw it out there, we can't put money aside that's permanent, but earmarks mean that this committee has made a commitment. As long as this committee stays together for 2 or 3 years, which I hope you do, because you're good, so. Anyway, that's why that was on there.
Well, I'm grateful that it's actually written onto our fund balance summary, because I think that makes it very visible, and these kind of, that gets carried over from meeting to meeting, and so on some level, it keeps it on our plate. But I kind of do agree with Scott that flexibility is an asset, not a liability in this case.
Yeah, you're right, I just wanted to throw out the only way we could permanently reserve it. But the earmark is good, and the way we're doing it now, it's there, and by having the earmark, the 950,000 that's left doesn't include the earmark, right? The earmark,
No,
if,
the 950 includes what's earmarked. The 950 includes what is available to spend.
And includes the 211 then.
Yes.
You mean 247.
I don't understand that. Adding up remaining here, does that not add up to 950?
No, I'm sorry, you're correct. The-
Because I thought we had 1 point something million, now I'm understanding how it's broken
No,
down.
You're correct.
The 211 aside, so when we said we had 950 left, we were talking about tonight's project?
It does not include what we
We
earmarked.
could take that 211 out if we had a project that we absolutely had to do. You're right, but that's there. Okay, good.
Look, it worked tonight. See, wasn't there, you know, in our mind, it wasn't there.
No, you're right. This is a good way to do it, okay. But to be honest with you, we have that earmarked and we have $200,000 in historic preservation. See the 333 that's left there? We put $200,000 in last year. And it went there because that's where the auditor said it had to go.
The 333 includes the 200,000
It's the
from last year.
133.
From last year.
133 is available other
One-
than the earmark for historic preservation.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, did we earmark another 200,000 this year? I thought we did.
And when we did the budget prep, we were going to, and then that's when the discussion happened that it would have
So
to
we
go
didn't
into
do it.
historic. So we didn't earmark it through the budget process. It will show up, because the committee made that decision, it will show up when the FY20 budget begins. I have a note
But
to
we
add that.
didn't want to earmark it in historic preservation.
No, it won't be, it'll be earmarked under undesignated.
I gotcha.
When the new budget comes up, there'll
Got
be
it,
a new
okay.
earmark under undesignated.
Because I thought we put money
for
in
Old Town Hall.
there, in the new budget. In other words, we did want to put another 200,000 in.
Yeah.
All right, well, gentlemen, I think and Jamie, you might write a little note to everybody who said they were coming tonight. Where the hell were you? Sorry. We all, and I thank you. You may not use those terms, but.
Seriously.
Motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
All in favor?
Thank you.